Squamish, Wailmeo, welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, motion carried. I just want to make sure people in the lobby can hear me. Just give a wave if you can hear the proceedings. Yep, we're good. Excellent, thank you. The only thing on the agenda tonight is consideration of third reading of District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2100-2009 Amendment Bylaw Garibaldi Springs number 2478, and the subsequent zoning bylaw should the OCP proceed. Consideration of that. Staff are going to present a report on the public hearing.
No, we have the report on the agenda, and we're here. We have some backup slides. We are here to answer any questions council may have. Maybe to start, we could just explain the recommendation and some of the changes that are proposed for third reading. So my name is Jonas Solonishkas, Director of Community Planning. With me today is Susan Stratus, a consultant planner working for the district, and Dave Merrill, our Director of Major Projects. And I'll turn it over to Susan to describe the changes that are proposed for third reading on the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. The OCP amendment remains unchanged at third reading. It's the same bylaw that was presented at public hearing. The zoning amendment has a few relatively minor changes which we have discussed before, but we are recommending these be brought into the actual zoning bylaw. The first of the changes is the definition of a cottage dwelling unit, which is revised. We had previously had a height of 7.5 meters, and after further discussion with the applicants, we brought that down. So the definition of cottage dwelling unit is revised to mean a single detached residential dwelling unit that does not exceed a maximum gross floor area of 140 square meters and does not exceed a maximum height of 6 meters for a pitched roof or 4.5 meters for a flat roof, and does not contain any habitable space above the first story. And I think that was an issue raised, that under the previous height, people could have tried to put a loft space, a second story in, so that would not be permitted. The second change under the development regulations is, again, just to add those same provisions into the table that's in the bylaw for maximum height in column 3, and it's revised to, again, rate 6 meters in height for any cottage dwelling unit with a pitched roof, or 4.5 meters in height for any cottage dwelling unit with a flat roof. And new row 4 is added, again, with reiterating no habitable space is permitted above the first story in the cottage dwelling unit. So other than that, the bylaws remain as they were presented at public hearing.
Any questions about that, Council? See any? That was the only thing you want to speak to?
That is the only thing we wanted to speak to. Other than that, like I said, we have we're here to answer questions, and we have backup slides if that's necessary.
Okay. What's your pleasure?
Questions?
If you have questions, put your hand up. Councillor Schell?
Can you just, since there's new people in the audience, can you just speak to the fire access again and how we are dealing with the fact that the fire road's been removed in the one parcel, the parcel B access?
Through the mayor, the fire access will not be removed from the plan. Should the development proceed, there will be a 4.5 meter wide paved emergency only access that will also serve as a multi-use pathway for pedestrians at West Coast.
Through the ecological area?
It will be, maybe you can bring it up.
Just light up, please.
Its exact location is yet to be determined, but it will be in that approximate area outside of any sensitive habitat.
In the habitat? Outside the habitat. Yeah, can you just put up a slide?
This drawing shows a portion of it in the top left-hand corner, as Jonas is showing. Again, this is a conceptual drawing. This pathway will all come in the details and the exact location will come in through the DP process.
And you can see the rounded portion of it here.
Do you have where it intersects with Dowd Drive?
Somewhat covered by the... That shows it.
Yeah, this map shows the conceptual and approximate location of where it would tie into Dowd Drive.
Councilor Chanel, is that
Yep.
answer good?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Any other questions, Council? Councilor Cryer?
Well, while you got the map out there, have you got one showing the trail network?
Yes.
This is the
Well,
map.
I mean, that's kind of, there we go. Where's the connector trail from the north to the south?
Through the mayor, on this plan, there are two trails shown that run north-south through the site. One on the right-hand side in blue and the one that Jonas is showing there in green. As has been previously discussed, the construction of those trails will be done so on existing cart paths. There will be improvements required, obviously, to bring them up to district standards. However, the exact location and whether we do two trails or one trail will be determined through the DP process.
If I may add to that, the next process, if the rezoning and the OSP amendments are successful, would be the environmental development permit process, which will define not just the trails, but also the development pods. So there will be another, that's where we're really going to get into the details on the environmental side of it. There will be another level of review, not just on the trails, but also the development parcels.
Okay.
Just looking at the agenda here, there's the recommendation states that prior to the adoption of the OCP Community Plan bylaw, the following items be completed. And the last line states highway access improvements and contribution to area traffic solution. Can you give me just an idea of what some of those may be?
Yes, through the mayor. There was a traffic impact assessment done, and that impact assessment recommended a number of improvements, including a right-in, right-out. Maybe we could find a map that shows it. A right-in, right-out where an extension of Newport Ridge Drive would intersect with the highway. That's one of the improvements. And actually, we have a slide showing those improvements. I'll just let Dave speak to the rest because they're a bit more...
While they're looking for them. So as Susan mentioned, one of the short-term improvements that will be implemented prior to the development proceeding would be a new right-in, right-out access off of the highway at the approximate location of the Newport Ridge, existing Newport Ridge Drive Road, and a connection through from the highway to Tantalus. In addition to that, there would be some signal phasing and timing changes at the intersection of Highway and Garibaldi Way. And those are the two short-term improvements that the traffic engineer recommended. And then subsequent to that, there would be some longer-term recommendations, such as a more general, wider scope traffic impact assessment for the area, and potentially an additional right-out from the mall onto the highway, as well as other movements, whether it's a fully signalized intersection on the highway or some grade separated treatment to be determined in the future.
Grade separated at the Newport Ridge?
These are suggestions that the traffic engineer made. They didn't specify a location where that might happen.
Thanks. I have a question on this and then just another question on the fire access. So this will be 3 exits in that short span on the highway then? So the existing Tantalus, a new exit in between, and then improvements at the current, or is that correct?
Through the mayor, that's correct. The traffic engineer assessed the location of those relative to one another, recognized that the distance from the proposed Newport Ridge Drive right in, right out, and the existing Highway 99 and Garibaldi Way intersection was close. However, it's similar to other intersection lengths on the highway. In addition, they assessed traffic movements that are using the existing right in, right out at Dowd Drive. And they noted that it was being used. However, they did not note any vehicles coming further to the south to Newport Ridge Drive that were using that right in, right out. So based on that information, the traffic engineer suggested that the Newport Ridge Drive right in, right out would be valuable and help traffic movement here.
For this one development?
This one development and also to plan for the future potentially.
Can I ask again? So going back to the fire road, at the public meeting, you had said it had been taken out and then now it's put back in? Or when I asked about the fire access, you said that, because previously I think it was taken out for riparian.
Some confusion there, I think. So originally, the original plan for the development had a vehicular connection between Phase C and Phase B, which basically is where those north-south trails exist now. That was going to be
Can you go back to so I can look at it?
That connection was going to be a full vehicle movement, so that would likely be a strata road was the thought at the time, but it would allow vehicles traveling through the site, not just emergency vehicles. Due to the environmental sensitivity and the wide area that was proposed for the road, it was decided that.
And the other thing is a turnaround for the vehicles coming in, for emergency access vehicles. Is there a turnaround for the access vehicle?
Through the mayor, because of the elimination of that north-south road, vehicles that were traveling in from Dowd Drive to the southern extent of the Phase B development, there would be no secondary vehicular exit from that area. So it is proposed that some sort of turnaround or hammerhead design be incorporated in that area to allow turnaround movements.
Would they be able to access Dowd Drive through there? Or not up on Skybridge?
Through the main access to the site, I don't know if we have a picture of it here, would be off of Dowd Drive.
Okay.
At that location.
Council, any questions? Some questions may come up during the debate, or clarification may come up during the debate, so don't go there. I don't see any more hands. Is there someone who would like to put forward this motion?
I'll move it.
So we're moving the OCP one first. We can't proceed on a zoning bylaw unless the OCP go first. So it's moved by Councillor Cryer. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Race. Councillor Cryer, do you want to speak to this first?
Sure. And, I've got a list of things that I've kind of been following through this process, and I just wrote them out in a list, so that's the way everybody's going to hear it. And I guess on the first thing was the petition that was out, and I didn't really know how to take that petition, because when I first saw it, it said, keep Garibaldi Springs green. And I thought, yeah, I support that. I support keeping it green. And I thought that this development actually keeps 77 acres green. So I didn't quite know how to take that petition all the way through, and when it was being brought up through different forms of media and that, I was uncomfortable with that. There was other times when people supported the petition on the fact that the road might be 4-laned, and that wasn't true also. So I can't say, when we have a petition, I mean, if the district was going to put out a petition, we wouldn't have worded it like that. And unfortunately, I can't put a lot of weight to it because of that. I think people signed it just because they weren't understanding it. I put a list of support groups which was Sorka. Sorka's interested in supporting it. The Trail Society, Stream Keepers, the hotel was interested in it. And, you know, with these groups, they don't just have one guy come up and say the Trail Society supports it. They have a board meeting and they discuss it at the board meeting and they ask their group in the board meeting. And then they make their decision and they bring back the force of that group. So, the habitat, as far as I understand, as much as I can get from it, is going to be enhanced. It's not going to be reduced. It's going to be better habitat for that area. It's going to take out all those golf greenways that were filled in with stuff. The number one thing for me is the public access. And also talking to many people that liked or didn't like this, they all mentioned, or a lot of them mentioned, how nice it was when they walked through there. So that's very important. I really do want to see the acreage that's left here to be public acreage, and all those trails that were on that map earlier be open to the public. That's something that I feel really strongly about. And I know there's people in the area that, you know, that live there that don't want development in front of them, and I really appreciate that. And, you know, over my 7 years on council, I know we've supported developments that have definitely affected adjoining properties many times, and it's you know, it's always a tough one, that one. And you know, 4.5K of trails. And then, you know, also when I get into a hard decision, after my little bit of time here, and I'm having trouble with it, I fall back onto staff's recommendation. Because staff have more feelers out there than I do as a councillor, and they understand all the rules and regulations more than I do as a councillor. And so, in this one here, staff recommend approving this. So that's kind of where I am on it. So.
Councillor Shabbat.
Thanks. So, I've listened to a lot of people talk about this project over the last few months it's been, since we basically, it sort of went off the radar and then came back on, and we've gone through a massive OCP process where we've engaged the public. And through that engagement, I didn't hear a single person say, I really want to build on sensitive habitat. I didn't hear anybody say they were interested in building on green space. And we passed an OCP that said, protect our greenways. This developer, I heard a lot of people speak to the fact that this is a developer to get this project done well. And I don't disagree that this developer is incredibly skillful. They've managed to purchase riparian areas and green space and senior citizens land and employment land, but none of that has been zoned for residential. And all I've seen is townhouses go up. So yes, skillful, but purchasing land for over the asking price, or for over the price that it's going to be zoned for, expecting zoning, I don't think is appropriate. This land may be buildable, but when we have an OCP that's basically set growth boundaries for the end of infrastructure, this is the end of infrastructure. Building on riparian lands and sensitive habitat and ecological habitat where there's endangered species, 2 endangered species, where there's fisheries habitat, where there's been bears, and there's an immense amount of ecology in this area. And maybe one day we will need this land to build on because our district becomes packed, but for me, now isn't the time. And I don't see that this developer is giving us anything but something that we can't staff, a daycare. For just having a daycare, we're getting the riparian area that we can't build on. that they can't build on. Here's the area that we can't build on, and now that is going to be your public space. So yes, we're preserving some ponds and some ecological area that can't be built on, and the developer is building on the cartways. But the developer had parcel A to build on and could have paid the appropriate amount. We could have densified parcel A. I might have even been in favor of parcel B, because I'm not anti-development. But to pack the exact amount of density into this space right now, when we have so many other projects on the books and so much density, and we have not maintained our public expectations. We're $118 million in infrastructure debt, and this doesn't give us anything but a contribution to our affordable housing. The other week I heard the mayor speak about a project that was downtown and how the public amenity was directly next to the site downtown, and how it wasn't appropriate to be putting the public amenity and the CAC, the community amenity contribution, in the same place. This, to me, is the same thing. You're putting all the community amenities into one space, right next to the adjacent townhouses, which makes those townhouses incredibly unaffordable. The proponent hasn't met our affordable housing agreements, has done less than for our affordable housing agreements. And I would say to council as well, with a quote from Steve Jobs, that deciding what not to do is equally as important as deciding what to do. And for that reason, I am going to oppose both the OCP amendment and this project going forward.
Councilor Kent.
Excuse me. Likewise. I have never supported this project development since it first came into this chamber. I don't think it's in the best interest of Squamish. I want to see the infill on the 6,000 plus units that we've built in the downtown area flesh out. I want to see how it affects our transit. I want to see how it affects our stores and our shopping and people driving on the streets. I want to see how it affects our protective services and all of these things before I see another development of this magnitude come online. And I also disagree that I think it will enhance our riparian areas in that section. Meager Creek and Thunderbird Creek are very sensitive places. They always have been. I disagree that management of stormwater is going to help protect that. I'm concerned that it will not. And so for those same reasons and a litany of others, I will not be supporting this.
And I did just want to clarify something before we went on. Just we don't have $118 million of debt. Our facilities and real estate master plan, no, our facilities and real estate master plan indicated we'd need to spend $118 million over the next 40 years to upgrade all our facilities. That's not what the infrastructure did. I just wanted to make
That's a
sure
completely
that's
separate.
clear. But that's the number you were quoting, but that comes from the facilities
I can,
master
if
plan.
you want me to justify the number, I'm happy to.
That would be great to have that clarified. I have Councillor Race and Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. And so I recognize that this is just the OCP part of this discussion in front of us. But my comments are really hard to separate from OCP and zoning, so consider them comments on both bylaws. This bylaw has gone through, or this proposal has gone through a significant evolution since it was first presented to us at something around 500 units, and it's now down to a maximum of 350 units. They have pulled away from the northern area, made that less dense, a reflection of the fact that there will be housing adjoining from a neighboring development. Reduced heights on the one parcel of land that is zoned today for development. Reduced heights from 9 meters to 6 meters and 4.5 meters, as we've heard, which I think is a significant accommodation to people building in that area. With respect to my colleague, it is not, in my view, dense. 350 units proposed for 48 hectares. Compare that to the ocean front, which is only about 60 acres, not hectares, with proposed residential alone at 1,100, give or take. A waterfront landing, about the same size parcel as the ocean front, for about 950 units. I would not, by any stretch, call this a dense development. The significant part of it is, and my colleague, Councillor Pryor, touched on it, is that this will provide significant areas that would go to the district as park and conservation areas are protected indefinitely into the future. This is considered infill, and some might not agree with that, but it is surrounded at the moment by residential development on 3 sides, and actually zoned for a part of the 4th side below the Thunderbird Creek development, which hasn't been built on yet pending other regulatory approvals, but already zoned, I believe, for residential development. So it is, our policy has since the early part of the century been to promote development in infill areas as opposed to going into green space. Services are there. You don't have to go off into the forest and clear new land. It was previously developed, granted as a golf course, which some might think is green, but nevertheless, if you ever watch a golf course being built, there's a significant amount of disturbance that happens in the course of laying down fairways and greens. So our OCP has been under a bit of scrutiny as a result of this, and I've heard from the public hearing and other comments the concern that we are changing the OCP designation. The OCP is a vision only, and it is not cast in stone. I don't keep statistics, but I would guess that approximately 20 to 25% of the zoning applications that we see since I've been on council have also been accompanied by an application to change the OCP to accommodate the development. This is not uncommon to change the OCP. OCP is changed for the oceanfront area, waterfront landing area. They turned from industrial to residential. Quest University, which went from green space to a university and residential. And even some of the surrounding areas, as we heard from one speaker at the public hearing, which are now being used as residential, were previously green space. So it is a vision document only. The vision document 10 or 15 years ago, I guess, when this development first happened, or this area was first developed, showed this as a golf course. That vision didn't work. And it has not been a golf course for almost 10 years now. It was losing money, and the numbers I've heard were staggering. And so far, nobody has rushed in to make it a golf course again. I think pretty clear to anybody moving into that area that something one day would happen with it. It is too strategic and too valuable a piece of land just to be left fallow. It has very sensitive ecological areas, there's no doubt about that. And those have been recognized in this development, and we've heard from experts on that about how the development proposed would avoid and in many cases enhance those sensitive areas. To me, like Councillor Pryor, one of the significant benefits to the community will be the dedication of this land. But the fundamental question, the foundation question for me in a rezoning is this a good use of the land? And I think it is a good use of the land. And so I will be supporting these 2 bylaws.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. So this has been a very challenging proposal to review. It's continued to change and evolve over the course of our discussions with the proponent and the community. And there's trade-offs, to be sure. I think for me, the worst thing that happened was when this land became a golf course. And that's when so much of the damage was done. And so I'm trying to weigh, whether this proposal meets the bar in terms of getting us to a better place than an underutilized piece of property that's sitting in private hands. So I think that overall, this proponent has been sensitive to the neighborhoods that surround this piece of property. This proposal provides certainty for the hotel, and also the landowners that are next to the RS1 piece of land they now end up with homes that in front of them that would not reach their full height that's allowed under the R1 zoning. I think it is important to take these lands out of private hands and provide a reserve. Our community is expected to grow rapidly. I think this provides more than just parkland, it's a reserve with a third-party signature on it, and that's important to me. I'm not sure that I would have supported this without that. I think a reserve is very different than a park. It shouldn't, it shouldn't be, and I've said this to staff, I don't expect to see when we get to land development agreements and the DP, if that's where this goes, I don't expect to see paved pathways fully lit through that reserve. I think we have to be sensitive to why we're calling it a reserve in the first place. It has high ecological value, and I think this site protects a lot of that for all future generations. I think that's important. I think the type and range of housing, and I agree with Councillor Race, this is not a really dense development. But the range of housing, the pocket neighborhoods, I think are important to our community. We don't have things like that. I think that, the benefits on trail connectivity, extending the corridor trail to the north is vital. And I think adding this infill density to this area will help us improve transit service over time. Because it's not a dense area there. Our number 4 does not have a lot of ridership. And I think this can help support that. I think I have some comfort in our DP11, the environmental DP process, the fact that there is continued oversight by Ministry of the Environment and Department of Fisheries and Oceans for this area. I think that is critical. And I think that works to help protect and enhance what's there. I'm still nervous about the Newport Bridge in out. I don't want the community to think that that leads to automatically Newport Bridge Drive becoming access further in to the next parcel of land. I think we can't make that assumption with traffic impacts well into the future. That's really sensitive habitat going that way. So for me, that Newport Drive in out is a very short-term fix, not necessarily part of the long-term solution. So for those reasons, I am supporting this OCP amendment, and my comments will apply to the zoning piece as well.
Thanks. I'd like to speak to some of the comments that my fellow councillors have made. SORCA did not support nor deny this. They have a mandate to not say whether they support. So Councillor Pryor, to say that SORCA supports it is incorrect. They did not go to the board. They are receiving funds, and I'm sure if the project goes through, they would be quite happy to receive the funds, and I think that's an excellent deal for SORCA. This land was already traded for density. The deal was to add density in that area. They had to maintain the green space, and the green space was the incredibly sensitive habitat and the drainage for the entire highlands. So the fisheries that the streams in the area that are currently salmon supporting and trout supporting and see quite a huge amount of fish go through there, and that's hemmed back. And a reserve is a place where people don't go. It's not a place where you add 350 townhomes and an immense amount of people. 700 people if couples move in and more with kids, riding their bikes and running through the sensitive habitat, cement and drainage going into the sensitive habitats. We have no way, we've never been able to control with DFO any of our sensitive habitats. Our community groups do an amazing job, but over the long term, if they get the contracts for this, I'm sure it would be a fantastic place. I hope they get the contracts because that would make the reserve, which isn't a reserve because there's park in there, it would make it a lot better space. But we can't expect our community groups to manage this without financing them. We need public financing to manage this space. And that is currently $150,000 a year. And I've sat in this chamber where we don't have enough money to mow our lawns and we cut $12,000 out of the budget and stopped mowing our lawns and had to add it back in after a while when people were getting ticks. So I find managing reserve, which has trails through it and people going through it, really difficult. We can't employ people in the daycare, so we're going to have a daycare given to us that we don't have enough people in our current daycares. So I'm not sure how we're going to staff this daycare or run a daycare. Even if Sea to Sky Community Services takes it over, they're having trouble staffing their current daycares. So that's difficult. And transit service, Parcel B, Parcel C are not transit accessible at all. This is a car-dependent community. There's no commercial space, there's no commercial nodules. It doesn't meet our OCP policy. And I also disagree with Councillor Race. Our OCP is not a guideline, it's a vision document for the community where you have years of public input, of public giving their opinion of how they want to see their community grow. And I've listened to people say that they don't want to grow into green space. People in this chamber saying they don't want to grow into green space. And we're not responsible for this development. And sometimes habitat needs to be left alone for bear habitat, for fish habitat. Sometimes public access, in order to gain a little bit of riparian space, is not the way to go. Sometimes things need to be left alone. It's not just about being able to take in a parkland and make it public accessible. Sometimes it's about leaving bear habitat where bears can actually travel through and not have to be killed because they're in residential areas now and eating people's garbage. So bear habitat, owl habitat, the two species at risk, I don't know how we're going to manage that. Are they being relocated when the ponds are moved? Because I understand that there's ponds moving and ditches being digged. That's what happened when the proponent was knocking on doors and people were asking about the ponds in their backyard. They were told that the ponds could just be moved and replaced with a pond somewhere else. So I have a lot of deep ecological concerns. And this community, like Councillor Kent said, the amount of density we're adding on residential land is already zoned, and the amount of capacity that we have in our already zoned residential land is enough to double our population, never mind adding 350 townhomes just for the sake of adding 350 townhomes. So it's really irrelevant to me that it's public access or not, because this is, to me, sensitive ecological habitat, not let's trade 350 townhomes because we want a park and a trail through it. We have kilometers of trails that are all being maintained by amazing trail innovators, and this one development, I don't say no forever, but at this point in time, when we have zero staff capacity to actually manage projects like this, where we don't know what the infrastructure costs are going to be like, because it's being built on sensitive habitat and being built on areas that are permeable and boggy. We could be building on gravel benchlands up at the top where there's already infrastructure in, and add that density if we're interested in density. But in this area, without knowing the long-term infrastructure costs of renewal in this area as well, over the long term, and who's going to pay for all that, because it's certainly not going to be the strata that's renewing their water and sewer in this area. It's too expensive. So I just wanted to make those points about how much money this is going to cost the community for infrastructure that's directly adjacent to the people benefiting from the infrastructure.
Councillor Blackenmore.
So first off, I want to commend the applicant as well as the community groups as well as the citizens who have actually really been engaged in this discussion, and it's very clear to everybody around the table that this is not an easy decision, and I think that the engagement definitely is in terms of dealing with a wide variety of groups and trying to put a project together is textbook, and a lot of applicants can take that as an example to follow. Unfortunately, it can't make up for the land use and the actual land features of the project. One of the more striking things about this proposal is Schedule A, and that shows, you know, the proposed areas that will be taken out of Greenway corridors. And to me, what's most striking is areas B and C. Those areas, those cause some very significant fragmentation. And yes, there are riparian setbacks and other things like that. However, the character of those areas will change very significantly as a result. In my mind, A and D, not as problematic. They are definitely contiguous with existing development, but the B and C, you know, to pull those out as well, I think those are very, very significant to the scope of the area. And as has been said earlier, the ecological values in this area, because of the water courses, are actually quite unique for Squamish, and it is a very important area. So in my mind, when you look at a revision of our OCP, and particularly when you're looking at pulling something out of a Greenway corridor, has to be done with very, very high sensitivity. And you know, all applicants know that when you do put in an application that requires a change, that the threshold is quite high. Nothing is guaranteed. And in my mind, and based on the review and the comments that have been received, I won't be able to support this amendment.
Thanks, everyone. As you've heard, I think this has been a very challenging project from the get-go for council and for the community. I concur with my colleague, Councillor Blackman-Wolf, with regard to the effort that the developer put forward with this. I believe most councillors spoke to this. This project has evolved dramatically over the 2 years that it's been under process. The connectivities through the lands have been talked about. The upgrades to Tantalus Road and Porter Trail have been talked about. These are all benefits for the community. The daycare is a benefit from the community. There's lots of things in this project that are excellent. Sustainability standards, the Built Green Gold BC standards, these are things EV ready, electric car ready buildings and homes. These are things that all developers should be doing today, but they aren't, and this developer had committed to doing that. The rub for me has always come down particularly to phase C or phase 3. These are the lands that really are where the recharge area for Meehan Creek come out. If you ever walk those lands, and I know a lot of people do, most of the year they're spongy and wet, and that's because the river, that river system and all the tributaries going down in that area recharge that predominantly the phase C area. So for me, this has always come down to do the pros, do the benefits, do the ecological benefits of the project that we get today outweigh the fact that, you know, it's private land and housing goes along with it. I agree with Councillor Elliott. The mistake here was this should have never been a golf course. It should have never been taken out of the ALR. It was taken out of the ALR. It was a golf course. It could be a golf course today, according to the zoning. The greenways are not habitat. They're not habitat for amphibians. They're not habitat for fish, certainly. They're not even habitat for small prey animals. Bears like to go and sleep in them and sun in them and that type of thing, but generally if you're on the high end of the pyramid, you're probably okay with a big open green space. If you're a deer or a raccoon or another smaller animal, greenways are just death traps for you. Really challenged by this. Unfortunately, I don't think this development quite hits the mark for me. I absolutely have no problem with phase A or B, or I guess phase 1 or 2, or lots A and B. There might be some spot areas of B that I think could be improved. Area D, I actually think could be more dense. I was disappointed to see some of the lower form, garden apartment type concept come out of the plan. I actually think that would be a good housing form in there, and I think they've done a good job of the diversity of housing, but I would actually like to see a different type, even that slightly more dense form of housing in parts of it. The 2 ponds at the south end, they're really not well designed. I wouldn't mind seeing them filled. They're basically fish kill ponds as they're designed right now. There's lots of ecological improvements on these as part of this plan that help fish survive and be more plentiful. And those are really laudable. But when it comes down to it, the net gain in aquatic and riparian habitat is only about 5.5 acres. And for something as important as this area, it's just not enough in terms of compensation for development. The other piece in particular is more of an east-west wildlife corridor issue, and it was brought up during the public hearing, and it resonated with me quite well in that this land needs to be, the east-west, we don't do east-west wildlife corridors very well. We've got a couple north-south ones along our river systems, but we don't do the east-west thing very well. And the Chima lands, when and if they get developed, and even the Holborn lands just to the east of this, need to have some sort of greenway belt concept that connects this area with the uplands area as part of their developments as well. The other piece, and the reason why I didn't support this project when it came to us 8 or so years ago, is I've never thought Newport Ridge Drive should be another access point up into the Highlands. We've allowed for that right of way to exist. I don't think we ever want to put a road or a bridge over that part of Meehan Creek. There's 5 tributaries of the creek that come down in that area, and it's just an area I don't think we should ever be planning for transportation up into the Highlands. Secondary, tertiary access to the Highlands will come when Dowd Drive is put through the Chima lands eventually, but I really don't think we shouldn't even have it on our plans that we have transportation access from the Newport Ridge Drive to the east. Sorry. The other piece I'm challenged by, and I don't think we've come up with a solution, and I realize this is something we could do after the fact if this moves forward, is I'm not sure an east-west, access egress at Newport Ridge Drive at the highway is actually going to solve any of our problems. We need to figure out how to fully activate the Dowd Drive intersection so that southbound traffic you can either go southbound or southbound traffic can access the highway there. And it looks like there's pavement there to do it. They sort of paved a little extra in that area. But I think that's what we need to do. We need to activate that site and not simply make another drive-in, drive-out area just to go northbound. It has to be a fully operational intersection. Not necessarily a light, but it needs to be accessed from both lanes of the highway. Just to be perfectly honest, if this came back in a different form, it's likely very supportable. My issue is that this doesn't hit the mark. There's a lot of great things about this. I applaud the developer. I think they've done a good job. They've been overly considerate, I think, of Greenside Estates. They have a green buffer there. Meehan Creek Estates, green buffer there. Even lower form housing, trying to be sensitive, and some development, lower development in the north end in phase A. And I applaud them for all that work. I just don't think this hits the mark, taking the considerations that I have just spoken about. Let me just quickly look at my notes to see if there's anything else I've forgotten. Anyone else like to speak, just put their hand up. No, don't see it. That is all I have. Any further comments? Seeing no more hands, I will call the question on the OCP. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kent, Chappelle, Blackman Wolf, and Mayor Heinzman opposed. Motion fails. That concludes our meeting.
So the opponent goes back and redraws and comes back to us?
That's an option for the mayor.
Put everybody ready to come back?
That's an option. We're not finished meeting. Motion to terminate meeting. Moved by Councillor Blackman Wolf, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. All those in favor? Opposed?